Hey guys, this is a short video on NAT's Q2 report. In my previous video, I predicted that NAT would beat estimated earnings, which it did, with 33 cents earnings per share and beating expectations by 5 cents. But even with the good news, NAT seems to be on a downward trend. Do we need the CEO to go on air again? I really like how they started off the report with this quote. Sometimes a chart is worth 1,000 words. So on the left graph, we see the net income, and it's in millions. So the last 3 quarters, we've been doing very good. As you can see from Q2, we actually beat Q1 earnings by 10 million. The second quarter and third quarter of 2019, we actually had a net loss. It's pretty interesting to see, even though we had a net loss, they were still paying dividends during those quarters. So, reading some of the highlights. So the net income for Q2 came in at 49.1 million. That's a 24% improvement from the previous quarter of 39.5. I did expect them to beat expectations, but I didn't think they would beat last quarter's earnings by this much. It's a really positive sign that there's growth. Dividends are a priority for NAT. They announced their 92nd consecutive quarterly dividend on May 20th. That's more than 7 years, so it's really impressive. And the dividends would be paid out on September 4th. So the time charter equivalent is used to determine the daily revenue of operating a vessel. So it's the higher the better. For Q2, it was 48,400 per day per ship. And for Q1, it was 44,100 per day per ship, which was to be expected with the increase. And I find it really interesting. Later on in this paragraph, it says, we'll see that 2020 will be a good year for NAT. So they're very optimistic for the rest of the year and 2021, which I like to see. Next, we see that NAT holds 144 million in cash, equaling 96 cents per share. And we can compare that more when I talk about the balance sheet. In the beginning of June 30th, their long-term liabilities is at 318 million. That's a reduction of more than 110 million since the end of 2018. So it's a really positive sign that they're able to pay off their debt very quickly. And speaking of which, in the conference call which will be held this Wednesday, the number 2 agenda, which they'll talk about, how NAT could be a debt-free company in a few years. So if my math is correct, they paid off 25% of their debt in 2 years. So I could potentially see that happening in a few years. Finally, it goes on to say that they have 10 scheduled dry docking for 2020 for maintenance. Looking at the income statement, we see that the net operating income is 10 million more than last quarter. And that's the same case for the net income. The net voyage revenue for this quarter is roughly 93 million. After all of the operating expenses, the net operating income is roughly 57 million. And finally, after you paid all of the other expenses, your net income for this quarter is roughly 49 million. And that's a 10 million increase from the previous quarter. We also see the earnings per share. This quarter it was 33 cents, and last quarter it was 27 cents. One of the things that did catch my eye, from last year till now, NAT has actually issued 7 million shares. I'm not sure how often this happens, but if it's frequent, it dilutes the shares. So that's just something to watch out for. So here we have the balance sheet. Right away we see that the cash and cash equivalent is at 112 million, and last year it was 42 million. So NAT does hold a lot of cash on hand. Our total current assets were at 182 million, and in the non-current assets, I see that the vessel's value has gone down because of depreciation. And combined with all of the assets, we're sitting at 1 billion. Current assets are short-term assets that are typically used in less than a year. Non-current assets are long-term investments, which are more than a year. Current liability is what needs to be paid within a year, and non-current liability is a liability that's not expected to be paid within a year. So the current portion of the long-term debt is $52 million, and that's how they'll tackle their debt. In the non-current liabilities, we see that their debt decreased by $70 million. And their current asset is greater than their current liability, which is what you want to see. So finally, in the cash flow statement, the net cash provided by operating activities is $118 million. And this is for the past 6 months. Minus the net cash used in investing activities, minus the net cash used in financing activities, would give you the net increase in cash. And adding the cash and cash equivalents from the beginning of the period would give you the cash and cash equivalent and restricted cash at the end of the period, which is $131 million. So they have plenty of cash available right now, which is a very good sign. So based on these 3 statements, we see that they had a very good quarter. So finally, what am I doing with NAT? Like I mentioned before, even though they had a good quarter, their stock price keeps dropping. I'm still optimistic because based on the earnings report and their public statements, they still believe 2020 will be a good year for NAT, as well as 2021. And also, the director of NAT, who is the son of the CEO, has bought 55,000 shares of NAT at $4.34. So looking at the last 3 months of NAT, the lowest point that we had was $4. So that's my price where I intend to sell NAT, if it dips below that. Alright guys, that's it for today's video. If you found this video to be helpful, be sure to like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments what you think about the earnings report. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.